It's time for the news.
The Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army, General Nshirah, has reaffirmed Algeria's commitment to Africa's peace and security, conveying President Abdelmadjid Tebboun's greetings and support for a stronger African cooperation. At least 47 people have been injured, most of them by gunfire from the occupying Israeli forces when large crowds surged toward a newly opened aid distribution center in Gaza. And Russia has called for the UN Security Council meeting this week to address what it claims are European efforts to obstruct Ukraine peace negotiations. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. Good afternoon. First in our news, Algeria announced sighting the Dhu al-Hijjah crescent, signaling the beginning of one of the holiest months of the Islamic calendar. With the crescent sighting, Eid al-Adha will be observed on June 6. During Eid al-Adha, also known as the Festival of Sacrifice, Muslims pray together, engage in charity work, and sacrifice an animal, usually sheep. Hajj, the annual holy pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia and one of the 5 pillars of Islam, is performed during this month as well. The pilgrimage spans several days and includes a sequence of highly structured rites. The Hajj pilgrimage begins on the 8th day of Dhu al-Hijjah and lasts until the 13th of the month. This year, Hajj is expected to take place between 4 June and 9 June 2025. Algeria is hosting the field maneuver of the North African capacity named Salam North Africa 3 from May 17 to 29, 2025 at the Higher Infantry School, Jalloul Abidat, as part of efforts to strengthen the operational readiness and preparedness of the North African regional capacity and to enhance the level of coordination among the various components of the capacity in the execution of its missions. Mr. Sharfi has more details in this report.
The Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army (ANP), Army General Nshirah, at the outset and from the headquarters of the 2nd Military Region Command in Oran, where he is on a working and inspection visit starting May 26, 2025, delivered a speech via video conference in which he welcomed participants to Algeria for the 3rd North Africa Peace Maneuver. He reaffirmed Algeria's commitment to African peace and security and conveyed President Tebboun's greetings and support for strengthening African cooperation.
It gives me great pleasure at the outset of this speech to welcome you all to Algeria on the occasion of the launch of the 3rd North Africa Peace Maneuvers, which coincides with our celebration yesterday of Africa Day. This event reflects our firm commitment to supporting the African peace and security mechanism in order to achieve the continent's strategic goals for peace and security, particularly those related to making our continent more stable, a goal pursued by Algeria, which is honored to have once again been elected as a member of the African Peace and Security Council. I also take this opportunity to convey to you the greetings of Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboun, President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, who attaches great importance to activating African cooperation mechanisms.
On this occasion, the Executive Secretary of the North African Regional Capability praised Algeria for its hospitality and role in the successful organization of the maneuver, highlighting it as part of ongoing efforts to fully activate the African Standby Force. He emphasized the maneuver's importance in maintaining readiness for peace support missions and thanked member countries for their commitment during this critical time. Earlier, the Army General, accompanied by Major General Mohammed Tayyib Brakni, attended a presentation on the objectives and phases of the Somoud 2025 maneuver aimed at strengthening combat capabilities and inter-unit coordination. The maneuver focused on training officers in planning and executing operations under potential threats.
Still in our country, the Secretary of State in charge of African Affairs, Ms. Bakhta Salma Mansouri, has received a high-level delegation of representatives of the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, the African Union Commission, and the African Continental Free Trade Area. The meeting came as part of ongoing preparations of the Organization for the Intra-African Trade Fair, due to be held in Algiers from the 4th to the 10th of September. The meeting aims to boost coordination with African partners to ensure the success of this major continental economic event, which constitutes a strategic platform for strengthening intra-African trade and encouraging investment and economic exchanges between member countries. To the Middle East now, where 24 people have been killed and 179 others injured in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. The figures do not include casualties in northern Gaza, where access to hospitals remains impossible due to heavy bombardments. Masoud Sharfi has more.
The death toll in the Gaza Strip has climbed to 54,084, the majority of them women and children, since the Israeli occupation started bombing Gaza. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez reiterated Spain's support for the Palestinian rights and denounced the worsening humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, calling for an end to the massacre. He said 1 year after recognizing the state of Palestine, the pain in Gaza is unbearable, stressing that Spain will continue to raise its voice louder than ever to put an end to the massacre the world is witnessing today. Spain was among the first European nations to officially recognize the state of Palestine, a move widely welcomed by human rights groups and the international community as a clear stance in support of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. Regarding humanitarian aid, the European Union reiterated the need to prevent the politicization or militarization of humanitarian aid, renewing its call for the immediate, large-scale and sustainable delivery of assistance to civilians in Gaza in line with their urgent humanitarian needs. The EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, the ongoing Israeli military operation in Gaza, citing the disproportionate use of force, the killing of civilians, and the repeated targeting of civilian infrastructure. The EU also condemned ongoing settler violence in the occupied West Bank. The statement highlighted systematic intimidation campaigns, physical and verbal assaults, the destruction of property and homes, actions the EU warned could lead to the forced displacement of entire communities.
And still in the Middle East, at least 47 people were injured, most of them by gunfire from the occupying Israeli forces, when large crowds surged toward the newly opened aid distribution center in Gaza. Jamal Salmani gives us more details.
The head of the UN Human Rights Office in the occupied Palestinian territories said in Geneva that most of those injured are due to gunshots, and those injuries were caused due to shooting by the army of the Israeli occupation. On Tuesday, local authorities said starving Gazans stormed a US-backed aid distribution facility, the Gazan Humanitarian Foundation, in the southern city of Rafah. Gaza's government media office said in a statement that the Israeli occupation's plan for aid distribution in the so-called buffer zone has failed disastrously. It said the occupying forces opened fire after thousands of starving Palestinians rushed into the aid distribution facility. Reacting to the chaotic scenes shared on social media, the UN Secretary General spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric said that a meaningful scale-up of humanitarian operations is essential to stave off famine and meet the needs of all citizens.
Frankly, these images are heartbreaking, to say the least. As the Secretary General noted last week, we and our partners have a detailed, principled, operationally sound plan supported by member states to get aid to desperate population. We continue to stress that a meaningful scale-up of humanitarian operations is essential to stave off famine and meet the needs of all civilians wherever they are. We and our humanitarian partners stand ready to deliver at scale, which is something we've been repeated over and over and over again. International law must be respected and humanitarian operations must be enabled without any further delay.
The newly opened centers, operated by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, was aimed at providing aid to around half of all Palestinians in the territory, or approximately 1 million people, by the end of the week.
And the Israeli occupation has launched airstrikes on Yemen's main airport in the capital, Sana'a. The general director of Sana'a International Airport wrote on X platform that the strike had completely destroyed the last of the civilian planes that Yemeniya Airways was operating from the airport. Sana'a Airport, the largest in Yemen, came back into service last week after time and runway restoration following previous Israeli attacks. It was mainly used by the United Nations aircraft and the only remaining civilian aircraft of Yemeni Airways after 3 others were destroyed in the last attack. And Russia has called for United Nations Security Council meetings this week to address what it claims are European efforts to obstruct Ukraine peace negotiations. Asya Bakar gives us more details on the topic.
Russia's first deputy UN representative said the meeting is expected this Friday, one day after Europeans requested the UN Security Council meeting on the humanitarian situation in Ukraine. He said Russia requested a meeting in connection with threats to international peace and security due to actions of a number of European states trying to hinder efforts to resolve the Ukrainian crisis peacefully, as the Russian official put it. The back-to-back meetings in New York will come 2 weeks after Russia and Ukraine held their first direct talks since March 2022. The negotiations held in Istanbul resulted in both sides exchanging 1,000 prisoners each over the weekend. On Tuesday, Kremlin spokesman dismissed U.S. media reports claiming that Trump is weighing new Russia sanctions. He claimed the reports are part of a campaign aiming to disrupt the peace process and called Europe an indirect participant in the war against Russia. He accused Ukraine's European allies of risking to misinterpret the preferred tone of the new American administration while trying to keep the Ukraine war afloat at the Security Council.
And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of our news bulletin for today. Time now for a weekly program, starting with my colleague Jamal Slimani with a program on tourism and particularly on the region of Dalis, east of Algiers. It will be followed by another program on economy, which is the economic magazine by our colleague Saad Bougazi. As for me, I'll meet again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin in English. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.